you for joining me today. I am Hawkeye, and this is Maple Leafs Man Advantage. And I'm going to talk about today. My video is going to be about the 1970 NHL Amateur Draft, and I really enjoy doing these. We're talking about the draft, looking at what the Leafs did, even looking who went first overall and how their career went for them. We're going to talk about an excellent one today that did go first overall. But I really enjoy doing these videos. So here we go. Um, so yeah, the 1970 NHL Amateur Draft had some real excellent choices in the first couple rounds for all teams to choose from. But that kind of petered off after that. Then the selections, some of the players didn't really uh, go on to have really great careers, um, which is good because some of the drafts have been rather thin so far on who to draft. But there's some excellent choices in this particular draft. Um, Now, I look at that, and to me, that means that this drafting idea in the NHL was growing and bringing more quality talent to the tent, if you will. And some of these teams, like now the Vancouver Canucks and the Buffalo Sabres, right out of the chute, they're able to pick from these same players that are available that the rest of the NHL does, and they can try and draft somebody that you can maybe build a team around right out of the chute instead of picking over the leftovers from every other team, which is still happening, but you can still make some excellent choices in the draft with some super young talent. Um, so yeah, you guessed it. The draft was held at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, and this was on June the 11th, 1970. And as I said, the Buffalo Sabres and Vancouver Canucks would be allowed to make draft picks as well, strengthening their teams even further. They both made some good team changing choices. As well, Buffalo got the very first pick, and then Vancouver was second. But Buffalo selected Hall of Famer Gilbert Perreault, and Vancouver with the number two pick, they chose Dale Talon on defense. Perot easily by this time was the best first overall selection in the draft of all time. Right now, it was Gilbert Perot. Um, and he would go down as one of the best of all time. And as I said, he is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Gilbert played 17 seasons, all in Buffalo, and played 1,191 games, scoring 512 goals with 814 assists for 1,326 points. Gilbert, he scored 40 goals three times in his career, including his career high 44 in 1975-76. He also had 100 points in two separate seasons, including his career high, which was 113 also in 1975-76. He was an All-Star six times, so that was 1971, 72, 77, 78, 1980, and 84. He also won the Calder Trophy this upcoming season as the top rookie in the year, in the league, I'm sorry. He also won the Lady Byng in 1972-73, so he was a clean player as well. He wasn't out there getting dirty. He led the NHL in 1976-77 with 9 game winners and had 19 career hat tricks. So fantastic career. And in the playoffs, Gilbert, he played 90 games with the Sabres. He scored 33 goals with 70 assists for 103 points. So he kept it up in the playoffs as well, getting over a point a game for sure. So Gilbert, he played his whole career in Buffalo, and unfortunately, as of today, uh, this is December 2024, they have never won a Stanley Cup. So unfortunately, Gilbert never was able to win a Stanley Cup. He was in the finals at least once, I believe against the Philadelphia Flyers in the 70s, and they had some really great teams um, in the late 70s, early 80s. The Sabres did, but unfortunately, at the end of his career, they weren't so great. They were, rebuilding again. He was still there. I would say about Perot though, like he's definitely one of those guys, and I don't know if it has to do because he never won a Stanley Cup, or because he played in Buffalo. Uh, he's one of those excellent players that nobody talks about. Maybe they are in Buffalo. I don't know, but I don't hear his name mentioned very often. And yeah, looking at those numbers, and I've seen him play back in the day. He was an excellent player, amazing player, and a guy you could build a team around. And Buffalo did. They tried for it. They just weren't able to win the Stanley Cup with him there. But yeah, there you have it. He went first overall. So for the Toronto Maple Leafs, um, and my team as well, I'll pick at that pick as well. My team wasn't very much different than theirs, but they had the eighth selection in the 1970 draft, and with this selection, eighth overall, they really hit a home run. And I would say this is one of the best draft picks they've ever made of all time with the Toronto Maple Leafs for the player that plopped right in their lap. And he's passed by twice by above all teams, the Montreal Canadiens. And I couldn't imagine if they drafted him. They didn't need him. They went on to have some of the best teams of all time in the 70s, but they passed this guy twice. The Leafs drafted center Daryl Sittler from the London Knights. That's who he played junior for. Would be him. He was born in Kitchener, Ontario, on September the 18th, 1950. In Daryl's final season in the OHA, he had 42 goals in just 54 games. He would go on to play 1,096 games, scoring 484 goals. He scored 40 goals in 5 different seasons with 637 assists for 1,121 points. He played in four All Star games 1975, 77, 80, and 83. He had an incredible 21 hat tricks in his career. 19 of them were in Toronto. And oh, yeah, he's definitely a Hall of Famer as well. I would definitely not change this draft choice. This was the guy to go for. Um, in a second, making an incredibly deep center group when you add Sittler into that mix. I know in reality, like Oliver was gone, but they still had Norman Allman and Dave Keon, and now Daryl Sittler. There you go. And I have heard from some people have said he was the best Maple Leaf of all time. And there you have it. I'm not gonna deny that he wasn't one of the greatest Leafs of all time. I've seen him play and doing my blog and going through in the videos now about the Leafs. He was awesome, and he has the record all time. 10 points in a game. He scored 6 goals with 4 assists. Um, in watching some of those goals, wow, some of those shouldn't have been in, absolutely, but they did. He's got the record. Gretzky couldn't beat him. Lemieux couldn't beat him. So far, McDavid hasn't beat him. He's got the record, most points in the game with 10, and that's Daryl Sittler. So there you have it. Now, next for the Leafs in the second round, they chose left winger Errol Thompson, who was actually a very good pick. He was born in Summerside, PEI. He would go on to play 599 NHL games, scoring 208 goals with 185 assists for 393 points. Uh, his best time was probably with the Leafs. He had a career high 43 goals with the Leafs in 1975-76. But personally, I'm fine with everybody saying, you know what, he was the right pick. But I'm going to make a different selection for my team just because he lasted a little bit longer. I'm not sure if Errol got into injury problems, but I would make a different selection. And I would select right winger Mike Murphy. I remember him. I'll get into this. He was a coach for the Leafs later, but he went on to play 831 NHL games. He still had the offense. He did score 238 goals with 318 assists for 556 points. Murphy, he didn't score 40 goals, but he did score 30 in 1974-75 with the LA Kings, which is the team he put his best time in with, I think, and most of his career was with the LA Kings. He also played for the St. Louis Blues, who I believe drafted him, and the New York Rangers. He was an All-Star in 1980, and he may have done some penalty killing as well, as I see he did score some shorthanded goals in his career. So there you have it. After his playing days, as I said, Mike got into coaching. He was a head coach for the LA Kings for the parts of two seasons, so 1986 through 88, and for the Leafs for two seasons in 1996 through 98. Matt Sundin was with the Leafs there, but that was um, after Doug Gilmour. Um, and Yeah, so they were kind of building that team up, and before Pat Quinn came in as GM, so it was a little bit of a downbeat with Toronto. Then they weren't quite good enough to make the playoffs at that point. But Murphy was there as a head coach. He was an assistant coach with Pat Burns as well with the Leafs too. So there you have it. That would be the selection I would make. So in the third round, the Leafs with pick number 36, they selected right winger Jerry O'Flaherty. He was born in Pittsburgh, PA on August the 31st, 1950. And Jerry had played two seasons for the Kitchener Rangers of the OHA. He played 76 games there, scored 44 goals with 41 assists for 85 points, so pretty good, getting more than a point a game. And Jerry scored 40 goals in 54 games in his final season there. So he was putting the puck in the net, sure. Good selection as Jerry went on to play 438 NHL games, scoring 99 goals with 95 assists for 194 points. He scored 20 goals in three consecutive seasons from 1973-76 for the Vancouver Canucks. Other than the Leafs and Canucks, he did play, I think, one game for the Atlanta Flames as well. His father was Peanuts O'Flaherty, who played 21 games back in the early 1940s in the NHL. And in addition, his cousin is Craig Muni. I'm going to be talking about him later, much later. But he was a Leaf in the early part of his career. I certainly remember him winning cups with the Edmonton Oilers on defense. But with this selection, I would make another pick, and that would be left winger Yvon Lambert. He was born in Drummondville, Quebec, and he went on to play 683 games in the NHL, scoring 206 goals. He scored 32 goals on two separate occasions. I think they were in consecutive seasons with the Montreal Canadiens. He also added 273 assists for 479 points. He won four cups in Montreal with the Canadiens in the 70s, and he was an All Star in 1974-75. In the 90 playoff games he played, he scored 27 goals with 22 assists for 49 points. So he kind of kept it going with eight power play goals and four game winners. So that would be the selection I would make there in the third round. So we're off into the fourth round now. And this is getting good because other drafts, they might have had five rounds. Sometimes they had three. I think they got eight rounds in the 1970 NHL draft. So we're only halfway there here in the fourth round. But the Leafs drafted left winger Bob Grip, I think is how you say this name. He was born in Chatham, Ontario on May the 6th, 1950. After the draft, he would go on to play in Boston University for a few years. There he played 88 games. He scored 80 or 41 goals, including the 20 he bagged during the 1970-71 season. He added 72 assists for 113 points. Bob would go on to play 74 games in the NHL with 11 goals and 13 assists for 24 points over the course of three seasons. He played with the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals. I would not have changed the selection. That's the guy to go with. Sure, with the fourth round pick by the Leafs. Now, for my own team, I love doing this too. And maybe some people it's like, oh, whatever, who cares? But I got my own team here too with the Leafs, and I did make a trade with the Minnesota North Stars the previous season, and I got their fifth round pick for the 1970 draft. So I would have their fifth rounder, and I would go with making the selection of defenseman Rick Wilson. He was born in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan on August the 10th, 1950. Rick would go on to play 239 NHL games. He scored 6 goals with 26 assists with 32 points. So not a big point getter, but he was a defenseman playing defense. Interesting to note, his son Landon Wilson um, became a Toronto Maple Leaf draft pick, first rounder in 1993, and I remember him. I don't know if I remember him in Toronto, but I remember him in Boston and Phoenix, I think. I remember him. He went on to play 375 NHL games and he scored 53 goals. So I remember him. So there you go, father and son there. So that's who I would select in the fifth round with that pick. And also, so with the Leafs fifth round pick at pick number 64, they chose right winger Luc Samard. He was born in Granby, Quebec on July the 29th, 1950. Unfortunately, though, Luc never did end up playing a game in the NHL, which is a little odd. Just 'cause when I look at his stats, they jumped off the page for me. He ended up scoring 68 goals with 124 points in 1972-73, um, as well as 67 goals. So one last goal and 123 points, so just one last point. That is extremely consistent. The following season, and this was with the Cape Cod Cubs, first in the EHL and then the NAHL. And then he scored the previous season 65 goals and 136 points, also in the NAHL. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this. I'm not sure. Is it the Bios Yaros? I'm not sure, but it was in that same league. He was still getting a lot of goals. Now, I'm not sure if this was a goal hungry league where there was a lot of goals scored. I'm not sure. I know the Q for a long period of time. They had a lot of goals, but my goodness, they had fantastic players coming out of that league. You put them in the NHL, and yeah, like for example, Mario Lemieux or Guy Lafleur back then. That definitely translated into the NHL as well. Um, so I'm not sure if that was a goal hungry league or not, though. But unfortunately, Luke did not get any playing time in the NHL even though he was putting up 60 goals in 3 consecutive seasons. But I would keep this choice. No one around Luke really had enough playing time for me to make that choice on them. So I would keep Luke with this pick and just go with that. So in the sixth round, at pick number 78, the Leafs drafted left winger Cal Booth. He was born on December the 23rd, 1950. And like Luke, unfortunately, Cal never did end up playing a game in the NHL. And just like the last pick, no one around Cal had a real fantastic career either, or a number of seasons where I'd be like, hey, there's the pick to make. So I'll just keep it at Cal at the sixth round pick as well. So we're going into the seventh round now, and I would keep this selection as well that the Leafs made, and they selected right winger Paul LaRose. He was born on November the 1st, 1950. Um, and in junior, Paul played one season in the QMJHL for the Trois Rivières Dukes and the Quebec Remparts. He played 57 games, but he scored 52 goals with 80 assists for 132 points. He actually ended up winning the QMJHL championship that year with the Remparts. Um, he never did end up playing a game in the NHL, but he did suit up in the WHA he scored, or sorry, he suited up for 33 games. He scored just one goal with 8 assists for 9 points. In 1972-73, he played for the Quebec Nordiques, and in 1974-75, he played for the Michigan Stags, which became the Baltimore Blades in that same season as well. But I would just keep that selection. Nobody else around Paul, I don't think, had a really great career as well. So I'll just keep that pick. Now in the eighth round, here we go. We're going to get a guy who did play in the NHL, a very late pick. He turned out, and that was goaltender Ron Lowe. He was born in Bertel, Manitoba on June the 21st, 1950. And Ron would go on to have an 11-year career in the NHL. He played 382 games. He won 102 of them, tied 38. He had four shutouts. His save percentage, goals against average were not that good, but I'll try and explain why. His save percentage was only 869, and he had a 429 goals against average. So he played for the Leafs for one season, but he played for the Washington Capitals, the Detroit Red Wings, the Quebec Nordiques, the Edmonton Oilers, and the New Jersey Devils. Now, that might be a good reason why. The best teams he played for were the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Edmonton Oilers. That was a very, very young Edmonton Oilers team that had Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, Kevin Lowe. They were there, but my goodness, they were just coming in the league. They were young, they were fresh, they were just trying to work their way into. They were making the playoffs, but winning playoff series. That was just the beginnings of them. But he was; those were the best teams he played on. He played on some very awful Washington Capitals team. The Red Wings weren't making the playoffs. I don't think the Nords were either. And that was the beginning of the New Jersey Devils, and they weren't making the playoffs either. So he was on some very bad teams. Um, and sometimes, like he was the number one guy, and he was a backup too. But there you have it. He'll be putting in some time in the NHL, and that's the eighth round pick. And Ron ended up coaching the Edmonton Oilers. I remember him there from 1994 through 99, and also the New York Rangers from 2000 to 2002. He was also the goalie coach. I mean, he was a goalie, but he was a goalie coach for the Ottawa Senators from 2005 through 2007. And certainly, I would not make a change to that. Ron Lowe was the guy to pick in the eighth round. So there you have it. The Leafs selected Daryl Sutter. They could have picked nobody after that, and this would have been a good draft. But they also picked Ron Lowe, um, as well as Errol Thompson, Jerry O'Flaherty. They made some picks here in this draft, so that's good.